Welcome to the Style Free Podcast, where a father and son detail and digress on the wide variety of topics within music, art, family, and culture. Your hosts are Professor Stephen J. Tyson Sr. and Jr., also known as Dad and Papo. In today's episode, we explore the connections, message, and evolution of black male music groups and duos, including the Four Tops, Migos, and more.
So my idea for us today was to surf Tidal, and I came across this playlist, the Ed Sullivan Show, some various performances that Tidal curated. And so I didn't know if there were any of these that interested you that we could watch and then discuss it all.
So let's see here. And these are all off the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do Reach Out, I'll Be There. Four Tops.
Four Tops, Reach Out, I'll Be There. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, that was great. I really liked the Four Tops songs. I had some of their records too, as younger, like Bernadette.
Yeah, that's a great song. Dude, and the bass line in that one.
There you go. The bass line is just bam. Yeah, that's right. That might have been James Jamerson, who was doing that, who was also Marvin Gaye. What's Going On? Played on those sessions. They used to call him the Claw because of the way that he used to hold his hand. But that was great. The things that stand out to me with that are several things. The harmonies, the idea of harmonizing vocals. And by the way, it was not called Levi Stubbs and the Four Tops. It was called the Four Tops.
Right.
It was not David Ruffin and the Temptations.
Yeah.
So that sense of unity. Yes, you had Levi, but sometimes others would take the lead. Yeah. Right. In the case of the Four Tops, it was usually Levi Stubbs. But in the case of the Temptations, it might be Melvin Franklin. I'm sending you some roses.
Blue is his nickname, right?
Yeah, Blue. Yeah. Then it'd be Eddie Kendricks, and then David, and then later on the other cat. But Four Tops, the other thing. Okay, so it's the choreography was the other thing. The vocal harmonies, the choreography. There was a guy back in the Apollo days, in Harlem. There was a very popular dance duo, not the Nicholas brothers, but they were called Atkins and Coles. Charlie Atkins and Honey Coles, Charles Honey Coles. And there's a great video of them doing this beautiful, very low impact type of dance step, but it's tap dances. They were tap dances, but actually beautiful. So he was hired by Motown, Charlie Atkins, to do all of the choreography for the Motown folks. Right. And all of the movements told a story.
So, whenever they're saying look over your shoulder and then
every gesture supported the story, the lyric. So it all kind of tied in together. And again, the suits, the single button jackets, the silk ties, the long sleeves, or the shortened. So that you see the sleeves showing with the cufflinks, that kind of.
And they had the brown loafers.
Yeah.
It was October 16th, 1966 was that.
It was 66. Yeah, I was thinking it was 66. Because that's, I think, when they flipped over the color around 65, 66. Because when
the Ed Sullivan Show.
Because James Brown on the Ed Sullivan Show was in color. And so I think that was 65, 66. And so, that was the style. You had to look sharp and clean and your moves had to be, good. Now, you can tell there's a little looseness in there. It wasn't like the Jackson 5, a few years later, where it was almost precision. That probably had to do with Joe Jackson,
Right.
Nobody could crack the whip at Motown harder than Joe Jackson could, with those sons. So anyway, but it still came off that they were in this together. They were singing it together. They were performing together, and they all supported the lyric, the song. It's just that Levi happened to be out in front and doing it. And I like that idea. Like I told you once, vocal harmonies to me, to have that in music is emblematic of the concept of people working together and coming together. Not just everybody out there for themselves and, just whatever. And, there's some the sense of purpose and connection going on there. And I loved also in Levi Stubbs' singing, I always loved the earnestness.
Yeah.
It's heartfelt. It almost cracks in certain places. He almost strains to get the emotion, the expression out while still doing the movements and all that. And he's got his process and all of that.
Yeah.
But he was the only one in the group, I think, that still had the process by that time. People starting to switch back. The temptation started getting out of that.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite groups. Yeah.
Nice.
Now let me ask you this: as somebody who's a stage performer, but essentially a solo stage performer, and media, what's your impression when you look at groups from Motown or when you see them on the stage, and what does that mean to you musically, or also in terms of movement or telling a story, or because you do tell a story, you do, it's this, whether it's degrees or this and that. What role does stage performance, choreography, and movement play for you? And what do you think when you see groups like this?
So for me, I definitely try to, with as many subtle gestures as possible, continue to push the narrative of the story with different hand movements, especially being an MC. Well, one hand is always on the microphone, typically, unless there's a stand for a certain song or two. But
or if it's a video,
or a video where there's no mic, a lot of the time. And so, so my hand movements try to either convey the energy or the content of the song in some subtle way, but I don't want to overdo it. But I think whenever it comes to like the larger aspect of like choreography, you don't often see that much anymore in rap or in hip hop choreography outside of breaking. You don't see, rap artists, incorporating choreography like you did in the early 90s with MC Hammer or folks who were imitating Hammer like Vanilla Ice and stuff like that.
Or Big Daddy Kane.
Big Daddy Kane was killing it. Yeah. Or Kid and Play.
Heavy D.
Heavy D. Yeah. So the choreography was a central part for a while within hip hop. And it felt like recently that's less so. You have artists now like Offset has done some choreography within his performances. Kendrick Lamar has some more theatric choreography and theatric production, in his performances. I've yet to have the opportunity to get bigger within incorporating more theatrics in my stuff yet, but I try to definitely convey different characters or aspects of myself depending upon the song that I'm doing. And so, there are certain artists right now who are incorporating some, more theatrics or other elements of choreography, not necessarily like dance numbers. But, looking at and comparing to groups like the Four Tops or the Temptations, and also like the synergy that you have to have with other folks on stage as an MC too can be difficult because you're also working, not just remembering the rhymes and all the lyrics and the pattern, but it's also about the patterns and everything too. And so if your dance movements are not in the same cadence as, how you're rhyming in that moment, I think it adds a certain challenge for a lot of MCs too, because, thinking about how much pattern is a big part of hip hop today, less so about the lyrics and less so about the message. And it's more about the patterns and the melodies that you're rapping with. I can see how there's definitely a greater opportunity for choreography to come back, but it's yet to showcase itself a bit more like it did back in the early 90s.
Do you think that when you think back, when we were talking about Big Daddy Kane and others where he had Scoop and Scrap?
Yeah.
Couldn't there be those guys like, what's his name, Board?
Storyboard P.
Storyboard P. Could you have like two Storyboard Ps or the twins do interpretations of what he's doing or pattern their movements in a way that follows the cadence of the vocals, right?
Yes. And it's excellent that you bring that up too, because that's something that I'm in the process of doing right now for my video BLM, where I have other dancers and other Black folks just in the video and being themselves, naturally themselves, but dancing to so a lot of the song doesn't have a beat to it until towards the end of the song. And so they're essentially dancing to the cadence and rhythm of my lyrics.
Right.
Getting up into towards the end of the song and everything. So
okay. Sort of like in the Baptist church when they have those praise
dancers, so to speak. Yeah. Yeah, definitely tapping into a lot of the spirituality and our spirit, just as, Black folk in America, but then also those who've lost their lives to the hands of police officers or white supremacists or anybody who's just, not trying to treat us right. So.
Yeah, and just one last point on the one thing I think I mentioned to you years ago when you're talking about vocal harmonies. I always thought it'd be interesting to hear. You've heard some rappers do this. They say and then their sidekick or whoever, they join in and they all say a certain portion of the thing together, and then they go off, and then they come back and they say like almost like a refrain. It's like when the Jacksons would go there and then they jump back together, to sing some part of before Michael goes off and sing.
Yeah.
So, I always wondered, why can't rappers, I don't see any reason why rappers can't harmonize rap, like 3-part, 4-part harmony for a certain phrase of lyrics and then go back to the soloist or whatever they have, or trade off, the other person take off, but they'll harmonize on a certain part. In other words, carrying some aspects of the traditions, the doo-wop groups, the vocal harmonies, the Motown, all that, and it's carrying history forward. When you first start out, you're gonna be blasting out and it's gonna be unique and everything, but it's still somehow, no matter how far out it is gonna have some thread, some DNA to the original. Well, why not look back, honor and respect those parts of the past that uplift and inspire the community, that respect the tradition, that uplift, and bring that forward into it so that there's no separation. I mentioned this the last time we were talking about it's sort of like the Sankofa aspect, or when I was at the Egungun Festival in Nigeria, in Oyo, and, one of the traditional Yoruba towns. And then the Egungun Festival, where basically the spirits, the ancestors come back and join the people. And there's this sort of rejuvenation, there's this rededication, there's all of this. And I think that that's important, that a culture is not set off adrift on its own island or thinking that it's on its own island. From a sense of community building, if the foundation looks like it's a little, weak or challenged, or if there's some aspect of it that can be built on, so that the foundation in real time now, because it's built on standing on the shoulders up, refortify that, strengthen that, build that, and then keep going. So I can. So that's just one other point I wanted to mention about the 4 tops. And,
I think conceptually that definitely exists. A little bit of the message, a lot of the message aside, the concept is definitely there whenever you think about groups today like Migos, who are signed to Motown and released their album, especially one of their more acclaimed albums, Culture 2, was released through Motown. And they're a trio. And the way in which they rap definitely leapfrogs and jumps in and out of one another, and at times can harmonize to some extent and layer within one another in ways that, are certainly homages and acknowledgments, and also wouldn't exist in certain ways without groups like the 4 Tops and Temptations, who were also pioneers on the same record label.
Now to that point, didn't Bone Thugs and Harmony
Bone Thugs definitely had a big hand in that, and that's a great point to bring up too. I mean, they're the pioneers of harmonizing within rap and are probably the best to do it ever, including groups today. And that's no shade to any groups today at all either. But Bone Thugs, without question, are
plus that rapid fire.
And now you got folks like Eminem and Joyner Lucas and Logic and
that's right.
Other heavy spitters who are really doing their thing. So
cool. All right. So what you got? Something you want to show? Something else on that list?
Yeah, definitely. I think the best example is probably Fat Joe and Big Pun, in their song Twins. But this is also a good example of a recent example of rappers jumping back and forth between a verse, not necessarily harmonizing.
Now, and you know, back in the day, it still happens now. Jazz musicians, you know, let's say there was a tenor sax and an alto sax, or a trumpeter, and they play, you know, the chorus and the whole thing together, and then the guy do the solo. Then the other one would do the solo, and then they would start going boom, 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 you know, and filling and finishing each other's or responding to whatever came before. So that part reflects that tradition, you know, that went on. So I appreciate that.
Definitely, yeah.
You're right. They definitely have that going back and forth. You know? I wonder what Snoop and Dre thought of that.
Right. I mean, Snoop said that Pun and Joe did it better than them.
Oh,
yeah,
man. Yeah. Incredible. But that's a perfect illustration of what I'm talking about, that kind of thing. Aside from the harmonies itself, but just now, when they did that, it reminded me that Public Enemy did that at one point. You know, with Flav, and but not so much. But some reason that's in my head. I was thinking some other, maybe Wu-Tang did it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Wu-Tang, Slaughterhouse. Yeah, there's a lot of like those groups that definitely have been able to, you know, leapfrog within one another in certain verses and stuff.
I miss that, and because it sets up a certain dynamic of interplay that we're all, again, goes back to that whole thing about being all in it together, you know. And
is there another one that stands out to you?
Boy, look at those names. Flip Wilson, you know, Richard Pryor. Chambers Brothers. I have that album. I have the album with that song on it. Time has come today. I haven't seen that in a long time. I didn't see that particular clip. I've seen them on, you know, other venues and everything. But the Chambers Brothers, now that falls into, you know, this whole idea about the, you know, first of all, it's an interracial group.
Yeah. I didn't. First of all, I knew that song "Time," but didn't know that they were black. I thought that it was a white dude and a white group that whole time. Didn't even know what group did that song. But so that was all brand new to me. Just that whole experience, and right now watching that video and everything.
And this fact that you have a song, you know, called "Time."
Yeah.
And I'm thinking Sly and the Family Stone had a song on their album. There's a
riot going
on. It's called "Time." You know, now in the end of that song, it reminded me, like in your song, you know, there's this, you know, he's using the cowbell, like a clock ticking, you know, and it's slowing down, and there's in the album version, it stretches out, you know, echo effects and all this stuff. So you're like, whoa, you know, time just gets expanded. You know what I'm saying? Which is part of that whole psychedelic thing, you know? There's a reference to that even in some of the lyrics of that song. But I'm thinking of Jimi Hendrix, you know, the cadence of his vocals has a certain Hendrixy quality to it. The electric guitar aspect, I'm thinking a little flavor of Santana, you know, when it particularly toward the end, when it starts revving up, you know. So yeah, there's a lot of people, Jimmy, Sly, Santana, and as I say, the interracial component to it, you know, which ties in with Sly, which ties in with Santana and Jimmy, you know. Yeah,
so it was interesting too how like the camera person kept the camera on the white drummer a lot of the time, a lot more than the lead singer at times. I was like, man, like. And like you didn't get to see the lead guitarist. Yeah, right.
No. Listen, but I'll tell you what. The only thing that made Sly stand out is that they had a woman in the band, 2 women, in fact. So you know that's one, and then Prince, being inspired by that, he took that on later on.
He had various women and races and all types.
Yeah, it wasn't until later on that Santana brought in had like Patrice Rushen. You know, female keyboardist.
I didn't know that Patrice Rushen was a keyboardist for Santana. Patrice Rushen, the singer?
Forget Me Nots?
Yeah. She was Santana's keyboardist?
She played keyboards for Santana. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, Chester Thompson did it. Then there was, I think, Greg Rowley, who was a vocalist. I think he did it for a period of time. Mm-hmm. There were some other people there. But in live performances, she's performed with Santana.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. And then, of course, you link her and that song to Will Smith.
Right, with the Men in Black song.
So again, we're talking about these DNA strands. But the thing, just to round out, the thing that impressed me, of course, was Sly and the Family Stone was not only interracial, but it also had women in it.
Yeah.
And then later on, Prince had women in his band. Mm-hmm. Then you had Miles Davis, had a woman in his band, Marilyn Mazur, who was the percussionist in his band in the late 80s. And then it reverted back. But for a little window of time, you started seeing the presence of women with what had once been male bands, more present. Now, you could talk about lead singers like Grace Slick during this time with the Jefferson Airplane, later on Jefferson Starship. But I'm talking about, women who were band members. Now, in jazz, that existed to a tiny, tiny extent.
Yeah.
You had the Sweethearts of Rhythm was one of the all-female bands in the 1940s, black band. Because everybody talks about, the male bands and everything, but what about the women?
Yeah.
There was a time where some of the men were going off to the war. And so there were more opportunities for women and women bands, to start coming in. Mm-hmm. And there've been some, even in the rock era, there's been some women bands that have existed too. And I don't mean just the lead singer, like Janis Joplin. And
right.
It would be great to see. So that brings to mind now, what do you think about I sent you a JPEG of Paula Perry talking about women in the rap genre. Mm-hmm. MC Lyte is, as you know, probably my favorite of the female MCs. There's a lot that I respect, Queen Latifah and all of that, but I don't know, it's just something about her. But can you think of a rap group where a woman has been part of the group? And I don't mean necessarily as the lead or rapper, but as part of the crew? Or has it always been all women and all, Salt and Pepper? Or
Right. As far as like functioning groups, I don't know of like a Wu-Tang Clan or a Slaughterhouse where every project was a collaborative group project, or most projects were collaborative group projects. So maybe with like something like Mia X, who was part of No Limit, or Eve, who was part of Rough Riders, even Queen Latifah was part of a larger clique and collective. But I don't know, as far as like those collectives having their discography be of that collective. Like, there's definitely been alignment with various cliques and crews and groups that women have been involved in, and so like it's definitely in existence for sure. I just can't think of off the top of my head. I think maybe the group that did White Tees, I think they had a woman in their group. Crime Mob, I think, had a woman in there. Yeah.
Or I was thinking first, then Lady of Rage came to my mind, but she's from the South, but she was with a group on the West Coast, right? Lady
of Rage came with like Dr. Dre and all them. Yeah, but like, I don't know. Again, I don't know if she was part of a crew or a clique or not. But again, if she was, like, I didn't.
That was just curious to me. Whether if there was a Sly and the Family Stone equivalent. That exists. Yeah.
That's a really good question.
And what does that tell us, about gender relations and men and women in the game, and to that point, when you talk about like categories, I'm thinking about now Flavor Flav is I think it's going to be 62 or something like that. Chuck D is going to be, he's 60 going to be 61, something like that. Anyway, rappers are aging, right? And they're getting up into
Jay-Z. Method Man is 50.
Yeah,
Jay-Z's 50 plus.
Yeah. So the question is that as artists in this genre age, is there what kind of room is there? Some people say, well, rap is a young man's game and that sort of thing. But is that really, has storytelling, has poetry? That's like saying, Amiri Baraka, poetry is a young man's game.
Right, yeah, and that's definitely a byproduct of the industry, so to speak. I mean,
how it's marketed.
Yeah, and without question. I mean, there's been so many conversations around, like whether it's this one infamous meeting that dictated the terms of how hip hop will be marketed in perpetuity by these mass corporations and stuff, or if it was less conspiratory and just a product of just the larger white supremacist mindset that exists in America and American entertainment and the decision makers of American entertainment. But I mean, it's interesting. So like you have a culture that was founded on peace, unity, love, and having fun. It's expressing itself through artistic and whether it's visual or verbal or physical representations of that. And at some point along the way, it becomes about predominantly about violence, drugs, and dismantling of the connection and relationship between men and women, and then also between generations. Yeah. And there's this divide, and so it makes sense as to why there's this common conversation around this meeting that allegedly happened among the larger heads of various record labels in like the early 90s or so, where people who are in the industry said, yes, I was either at that meeting or knew of that meeting or whatever the case may be. Because it seems too intentional in how things have been divvied up and pit against one another in a culture that is not founded in that one. And then how the culture was even created, it wasn't about that either. It was all about it. Like the only reason why a culture like hip hop exists is because it's about unity and connection and peace and positivity and prolongedness and all of the things that come with the richness and cultural norms of everything that hip hop is derived from. From various cultures in Africa, and how that is translated through various European cultures in the various islands in, the West Indies or in the Caribbean or in the Virgin Islands, in South America, and how that's made its way into the United States, and how that became Gullah Geechee culture, and how that became Cajun and Creole culture, and how that became all of the other things that then informed jazz and blues and rock and funk and soul, and then created the musical foundation once being able to learn how to play instruments was taken out of these, social systems. Then you have folks manipulating the music of these past eras and creating an entirely new culture through taking these records and mixing them with their hands and blending these previous musical compositions into something that's brand new in hip hop. There's too much disconnect right now in mainstream hip hop that doesn't accurately represent what the culture is about and where it's continuing to go. Because where the culture continues to go is not what's represented whenever you turn on BET, MTV, or listen to Clear Channel Radio or whatever the case may be. Because it's the same people promoting the same business interests. Because every artist who's signed to any of these major labels, it's essentially just a predatory loan. And the purpose of that is to recoup the money that they're giving these artists. And so they're going to then magnify and put these artists on platforms. But then it's like, well, who are the artists that you're signing and why are you signing them? Oh, well, they're representative of their community and their culture and they got a following. But what are they actually talking about and representing? How is that then continuing to perpetuate a cycle of things that are, creating conditions of negativity and mental conditions of negativity and of regression, where you have, consistent murder rates. And then the soundtrack of people's lives are talking about how I'm murdering everybody day in and day out, or how I'm stacking up money because I'm selling all these drugs to all these folks. Not talking about I did all this and I made it out. And this is like Hov said, like Hov did that. So hopefully you won't have to go through that. It's not that message. It's I'm doing this and get on just like me, or it's not even there's nothing beyond just the glorification. And so it's just like, damn, like, and so that's why
celebrating the pathology.
Yeah. And that's why you have literal teenagers out taking assault rifles and shooting them off and people getting killed left and right, because it's this concept of it's celebratory or it's a status or it's a and I can see how it's there's a feeling that it can be very conspiracy driven. You notice how the power of hip hop. You have groups like Brand Nubian and all these, Afrocentric groups in the mindset, and then immediately once that is at the forefront of hip hop, here comes everything that we've been in ever since. So,
well, that was the whole argument about gangster rap, quote unquote, where you took the militancy of the self-destruction. Well, the self-destruction was in part a response to that. But the whole idea of the quote unquote conscious rap is a way of sort of, okay, we got the party part down. Now let's reach for something a little bit higher. Let's get more agency in terms of transforming our environment, into something that's more positive through consciousness. Now somebody is coming across and saying, we're going to take that same energy and we're going to say that I didn't like the way that person looked. So wait a minute, why are you bringing us back here? We're trying to get out of that. We're trying to deal with the conditions that cause the development of this kind of mentality and self-hate and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Come on, let's take this up higher. But so what are the forces then, the incentives that are being offered to people? You want to get out? Just do this. Come on.
Right.
That way anyway, right? People just whispering in each other's ears and then saying, hey, man, you don't have to be with that group. We'll make you a solo art. You can do your own thing. Get your own deal. And all of a sudden that unity, the group then, goes off in a different direction. So, these are the kind of things that it's like the music is just one arena where we see these, as you alluded to back, before earlier in the conversation, this whole divide and conquer, strategy has been taking place. It's so, talking about music,
Absolutely. And whenever you take it into, like, the last point I'll make is, like, whenever you take it then to beyond hip hop, but still in the music industry, just this morning on the local news, they were talking about how for the first time that they can recall, that they've calculated that in the Billboard's Hot 100, the first 50 acts of the Hot 100 are all solo acts.
Right.
There's not a band within the first 50 acts. And they were like then asking, what about certain boy bands? What about this? And apparently within this week, none of the groups or bands are within the top 50.
There you go. I think that that's indicative of what I was saying, why really this idea about collectivity and working together. And to your point, promoting content that has a life message, not a death message,
Yeah.
That's affirming, not descending into, what's the word I'm looking for? It's sort of a nihilistic way of seeing life and experiencing, through that lens. This is going in another direction. So what's the task of the artist? Does an artist have a responsibility? Does an artist have a responsibility to themselves first? And or do they have overriding that a responsibility to the community? If you look at other cultures that have existed, sometimes we'll say, well, the artist doesn't exist apart from the culture,
right?
From the community,
right?
So therefore, they have it baked into that is that they have a responsibility to support the community, and the well-being of the community. Right?
Yeah.
Now, if you subscribe to that idea, if you don't have a problem with that, then you shouldn't have a problem with putting lyrics and ideas and concepts. I mean, yes, we're not one-dimensional people, so you're going to have lyrics about this and lyrics about that. But overall, are the lyrics about feeding back into, like garbage in, garbage out? Is it feeding back? What are you feeding? What are you giving? What are you selling on the corner to your community? What are you putting in their veins?
Yeah.
Are you just another hustler who's just, here, take a bag here, here, put some of this, try some of that.
Right.
And, some have used the terms like packets and stuff. I think that was back in the 90s, during the crack era.
Yeah. People definitely refer and analogize their music to like selling crack or selling drugs and stuff like that. Yeah, still to this day, very much so.
Wow.